My name is Ian Taylor. I'm the Vice President of Global Sales for the repair business of Barnes Aerospace. My responsibility is to look after the entire company's sales from a repair perspective on internal engine components across our 5 sites globally that look after the component repair business. Our business is focused on repairing the internal engine parts, gas path, shrouds, seals, segments, cases, across a whole multitude of engines spanning from small engines with the P26, for example, all the way through to the large engines, G90, Gen X, Gen 1000, etc. PW4000, CF6s, V2500, CFMs, everything in between, right across the board. If you can say it as an engine, we probably do something on it. I think if you attend any of these conferences and you're listening to the speeches and the conversations that are happening, it's very obvious that it's a struggle right now. The supply chain is constrained in multiple areas. It's not difficult to pick that up. The question is, how do you get around that? And the question is, what exactly is driving it and how can technology advance it? So it could be linked into material, it could be linked into manpower, it could be linked into a whole multitude of geopolitical situations. But we all know that right now it's a challenge to hit your turn times, it's a challenge to get things from forges, it's a challenge to get the details, etc. So definitely constrained, I would say, and an opportunity, for people who are willing to invest, that's to be able to get out of that constraint in a proactive manner. So I would honestly say, it's not regions in many ways. Although, if you look to the West, certainly manpower is harder to come by than perhaps in those regions. That being said, we're also seeing, more constraints in the Eastern regions as well around the manpower side for some of our suppliers and how they're managing that. Manpower is an issue across everywhere. Again, if you talk to any of the people in the business, they will tell you it's hard to find those experienced personnel. And how do you manage that in the best way is something that's significant. Of course, the other issues are linked into the material. Everyone knows right now there's geopolitical challenges that are causing challenges around getting the forgings, the rare earth metals, etc., etc. How does that then lead up? It goes straight from the bottom to the top of the supply chain. Well, for people like us who need to get the repair details from a limited source, i.e. the OEM in many cases, that's just not available, or the relative amount of time it takes fluctuates quite considerably compared to what it may have done maybe 10 years ago. I would say it's a mixture of both. I think things change. Your question earlier around, is it specific on components? It may well be. At some point it may be linked into titanium. Other times it might be linked into plasma powder. These are all the short-term ones that are coming through. But overarching, it is that issue in the longer term. How do we get all of these precious metals processed through the supply chain? Again, right from the bottom through to the top of all of these things is causing issues. So definitely short-term, but the short-term ones are normally resolved. But there is some long-term systemic challenges, I believe, around where we can get to in the future unless companies adapt in a very significant way to be able to move with the times. So for us, we have a mixture of how we're responding. I think first and foremost, our shareholders are very willing to invest. Very willing to invest in a multitude of things, whether that be buildings to allow us to expand. But of course, that then leads into manpower, and a key portion of that, how do we invest in manpower? Human capital is extremely important to us, and creating a culture where people want to work in this industry and attracting those folk, including their kids. Let's make it a family business again, where parents and kids all work together through apprentice training schemes, offering the ability for them to learn a skill and work through that. That's one thing from manpower. Of course, the other thing that is really important in the industry right now is the use of technology. How are we working through smart connected factories? How are we driving the lean approach? What are we doing? And Barnes is very, very heavily influenced on how we're using AI, how we're using predictive maintenance, predictive, repairs and schedules for the fixtures and fittings that we use. So a whole multitude of things, technology, culture, and generally just being someone with the ability to invest in the future of where we're going to be. It's a really interesting question when we talk about this. For me, customer expectations haven't changed. So the situation has changed around how we get our precious metals, and prices have gone up recently. Obviously, geopolitical oil prices going up. Expectations have not changed. What do we need to deliver as a company? We need to deliver value, not necessarily the cheapest price, but value. We need to perform in terms of our quality and our turnaround time. And this, to me, is the expectations that have been all the way through the last 25 years of my career. And to be very honest with you, if you deliver those, if our sites deliver those, the conversations are pretty easy with our customers. I think there will be challenges. I don't think it will be fully resolved. I think the right words there will evolve. I think lots of companies are investing in technology to try and utilize the manpower in the best way that they can, utilize the machines and the capacity that they have with the constraints that they have. So it will definitely change. It will definitely evolve, probably into a more machine automated view, I would say. But I don't think that will take away the need for human capital, which means we have to, as companies, invest in our people as well. I think, and I truly believe, our ability, the variation of the repairs that we have across all of our different engine types is a great thing for our customers. It allows them to use Barnes Aerospace as a one-stop shop. They don't have to manage multiple suppliers across multiple platforms. They can come to us. They have the same logic across all of the sites. They have the same culture. They then only have one supplier to deal with, which means they can drive some value through their economies of scale and utilizing one person, or one company, should I say. And that is Barnes Aerospace. And what we strive to do, expand our offerings to our customers, listening to our customers, and making sure we offer the best value for it. I think as much as we all like to say everybody knows everybody, that's not true. There's a lot of companies that are starting. There's a lot of things that are changing in our companies respectively, and of course in the industry. It's all about learning. It's about networking, reconnecting, of course, but it's about learning what are other people doing. We can all do better. We can all learn from each other. And these events are something that allows you to gain that perspective about learning and developing and growing yourselves.